Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Ever since I began YouTubing, my goal has been to connect with the horror reading community. And even though my viewer number isn't astronomical, I feel like I have achieved that goal. And I say this because at the end of each video I do, I always ask for a book recommendation in regards to the last book I reviewed. And may it be through comments on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, I have had a response on books that people said that I should check out. And because of this, I decided for this month, I'm going to go in and start reviewing some of the books that have been recommended to me by you. And with the book I'm reviewing this weekend, it's going to be The Willows by Algernon Blackwood. And if you have watched my past videos, you know I'm a huge fan of Algernon Blackwood, and I feel he is highly underrated. But that's a different story. But this is the third time I have read The Willows, and if you're wondering what has made this book fall into my hands again, is because ever since I started doing these videos, I've developed an online friendship with a wonderful person by the name of Lisa G. And she and we correspond back and forth about all things creepy and scary, and in one of our conversations, she asked what I thought about The Willows. And we had a brief discussion of it, but then she requested that I do a video review on that book. So, Lisa G, this video is for you. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for recommending that I do this video because you know I love going back to Blackwood as many times as possible, and this just went on and gave me an excuse to visit this story again. So thank you for requesting I review this, and once again, I hope you enjoy. Unfortunately, I don't have a print copy of The Willows, but if you download this, which is the first Algernon Blackwood Mega Pack collection, it has 36 stories in there. The Willows is among those stories. And this is the third time I've referenced this title because you also have stories like The Wendigo and The Damned in this as well. But on to what you can expect from The Willows. Now, this story takes place near Budapest, and it introduces two characters who remain nameless throughout the entirety of the story. Now, the story is told in a first-person perspective from a Canadian man, and he speaks about a time when he and his Swedish friend decided to row down the Danube River to gain access to the Black Sea. Now, they do this during a time when there's the flood season, so the river is already roaring, and they begin their journey, which it's going as planned. They're away from society, it's just them and nature, and all of a sudden, you have this hurricane gale force wind that blows them westwardly, and it takes them off of their course where they are forced down a canal, and this is where they become marooned on an island that just so happens to be haunted. And as day turns into night, the men discover that the willows on this island are doing some very abnormal things. Like they're speaking amongst themselves, they're laughing, and they're moving. But as the night progresses, more horrors tend to develop, and the men discover that these horrors need a sacrifice in order for there to be a natural balance to the world. And for them, these two guys are nothing more than sitting ducks. The Willows was published in 1907 as a part of the collection The Listener and Other Stories. But rather than focus on the response this work received, I would like to elaborate on elementals, as Blackwood utilizes these spirits in this tale. Elemental spirits are entities that fall into one of the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. Because of this, the majority of their hauntings take place in nature, as they hate chaotic city life. However, buildings used for ritualistic purposes might host elemental hauntings, but those are rare. Type of elementals include, but are not limited to, fairies, goblins, gnomes, elves, leprechauns, and mermaids. Among them, earthly elementals can cause earthquakes, floods, gales, thunderstorms, and wildfires, but all elementals can cause sensitive people to suffer a mental unbalance. Also, in some indigenous areas, elementals are given ritual offerings for environmental balance. Fun facts. In the book review I did for The Damned by Algernon Blackwood, I covered how he was a part of the Ghost Club. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about that, I have included the link to that video in the description section of this video. And also, I'll include the link to the Wendigo as well. And so if you want to see those, just scroll down, click description, there it is. But if you would like to learn a little bit more about Algernon Blackwood, all you have to do is just sit back and let this continue to play. In Algernon Blackwood's late 30s, he began writing stories of the supernatural, and among his stories, The Willows is one of his most famous visions. Throughout his life, Blackwood wrote 15 novels, 2 children's books, 7 plays, multiple essays, and many short stories. Among these, it was his short fiction that became adapted into radio and later a television series called Tales of Mystery. Also, if you have read his work, you shouldn't be surprised to learn that Blackwood not only had a profound interest in the occult, but he also loved nature. Now that we have that covered, it's time to move on to the spoiler section. This is going to be where I discuss some moments in the book that could ruin it for you if you've never read this before. So if you wish to skip this, just scroll down to the comment section of this video and you'll see that I have a pinned comment at the top that will provide a timestamp. And if you click on that timestamp, it will redirect you to the thoughts section of this video. Now you only have 17 seconds to do this. So ready, set, go. Now that everyone has had a chance to click away, I want to discuss my favorite scene and some of the subjects that surround that scene. Now, with The Willows, it is a slow burner, and like with all slow burners, you have these subjects and hints that come into play, and they seem insignificant until you actually get to the end of that movie or book and discover, okay, all of this was deliberate. This was giving us hints towards a bigger picture, and it's like breadcrumbs just leading to a grand finale. And when I read The Willows the first time, I missed out on a lot of these, but then when I read it a second time, I started picking that up a little bit more. And when I read it recently, I determined I wanted to see exactly when the men had first been attacked by the elementals. And upon reading this, I think that they were first attacked when they were rowing down the Danube and a gale force wind blew westwardly and caused them to go off a track and down a canal, which led them to the haunted island that they got marooned on. Now, the reason why I feel that this was deliberate and that this was the air elemental is because later in the book it explains how the elementals really need a sacrifice or an offering for there to be balance. And so this was the air elemental going on and putting them in a situation where they would probably die and the elementals would gain from their death. So next we have the earth elemental that comes into play. And when the men first land on the island, this is so strange because I still am not certain about the significance of the dead otter here. And the thing is, when they get onto the island, the men first see a dead otter that they mistake for another man because it's so huge. And my thing is, if this is an otter that is the size of a man, perhaps this is something that is unnatural to our world. But that's really never explained. Maybe if I read it a fourth time, I'll get it a little bit better. But until now, dead otter on the island. But as the day progresses, the men build a camp there. And when night falls, the narrator starts to hear the Willows talking, laughing, and moving, just in all of these unnatural things that are going on around him. And even though he dismisses this, he continues to be accosted by just creepy things that intensely grow throughout the night. And one moment that is really kick-ass, and it's not frightening, but the imagery is awesome. It's where you see the spirits rise up from the ground and they ascend into the air from the willows. And by how this is constructed, it reminds me of that scene in Fantasia where they are depicting Walpurgis Night. And it reminds me of that, so it was really cool. But on to what happens next is they decide that they need to get off of this island because there are evil spirits here. And when day breaks, they go to their boat to try to get away, but then they discover that their boat has a hole in the bottom of it and they're missing a paddle, which we think, okay, maybe this was just their own doing when they were traveling the canal. Maybe the paddle missing is just, bad luck. But no, this is the elementals deliberately keeping them on that island. And we don't know if it is the earth elemental or the water elemental or both who have caused their paddle to show up missing, and then also for the hole to go in the bottom of their boat. Well, the men spend the day repairing the boat, and by the time they're done, night has fallen, and it's too much of a risk to go down the canal because they could end up wrecking for not being able to see where they are. And this is where the fire elemental comes into play, because they have built another campfire, and as they're sitting at the campfire, they look into the flames and they see this large subject that reminds them of the willows that's constantly growing and coming towards them. And this is what leads to my favorite part in the book, because while they're focused on this, the wind starts to pick up. The willows start to move and talk and do all of their unnatural things. And then something manifests beyond the willows. And whatever this thing is, it's never existed as human or animal, but it's approaching them with the intent for a blood sacrifice. And even before this happens, the Swedish man notes that they need to have a offering or a sacrifice for the elementals so the spirits will focus elsewhere than on them. And as the figure is approaching them closer, it's just becoming more intense. And then all of a sudden, everything calms and there's nothing else. Well, the next day, the men get up and they are walking the shore and they find a dead man. And this is the same man who had rowed past them about 2 days ago. And when he had seen them marooned on the island, he didn't help them. He just kept rowing. And the Swedish man had said that it was out of fear due to him thinking that these two were elementals. Well, it's estimated that this man had died last night at the same time where everything went calm. And we know that the elementals are to blame for his death because he's been held underwater by the willow roots. And so his cause of death was drowning. And so it's just really interesting to see how everything has come together so the elementals can gain their sacrifice and then balance be restored. And this was something that the more times I read it, the more I loved it. And it's totally something that if you're not paying attention to what's going on, then you're going to miss out a lot on the book. But at the same time, these aren't really things that I can point out at the end of the video because it's nothing but spoilers. I honestly don't have anything to bitch about with the characters in this book. I mean, they didn't do anything stupid. They didn't deliberately go out seeking trouble like how some dumbasses do, just wanting to, explore a location that's rumored to be haunted or something. And so all they really wanted was just a little adventure. And what they got in the long run was total horror. Now, the thing is, I honestly believe that they made do with what they had. And if I were in that situation, I would have been doing the exact same thing these men would have been doing, which was just to try to wait it out or try to just haul ass at the first chance I had the opportunity. And truth be it, I mean, this is a cosmic horror story. They are faced with something that is much bigger than themselves. And when you're faced with circumstances like the wrath of Mother Nature or whatnot, you're just bound to do nothing more than put your head gently between your knees and kiss your ass goodbye. Now, I will say this though, there is the scene where you have the Swede who notes to the narrator that the man who rode by them doing the symbol of the cross and everything was afraid that they were elementals. And then he explains to the narrator that people around here have a superstition about elementals. Well, even though he had that knowledge, it doesn't ever say anywhere in this where he was warned not to go down the Danube. But he does have enough knowledge about how the elementals work, such as him being able to explain that they need a sacrifice so the spirit's attention can be directed elsewhere. So this does show that the Swede has knowledge of what people in this area fear. But again, it never mentions anyone ever warned him or anything such as that. And truth be it, if I was him and someone said, oh no, don't go over there because there's like gnomes and fairies and stuff like that, honestly, I wouldn't believe them, because to me that idea is just too far-fetched. And again, it never says anyone warned him. So pretty much what we have here are two people who are simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Although I haven't read many stories by Algernon Blackwood, I would rank my favorites as such. We have the Wendigo being number 1, the Willows being number 2, and the Damned being number 3. So those 3 are really great. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to correlate the time of year with what you're reading, the beginning of June is an ideal time to start the Willows, because the story does take place at the beginning of June, and this isn't a thick book whatsoever, so you could read it within a day or so. Now, if you also have plans to go camping or whatnot, this could also be a great book to bring along with you for camping. It would definitely set the mood, that's for sure, especially at night. Now, as far as the scare factor is concerned, I was not frightened by this book whatsoever, but it was an intense book. And as I had mentioned in the spoiler section, that this is a slow burner. And with all good slow burners, you have these little Easter eggs or breadcrumbs that lead to a grand finale, and you're really not certain of the significance of those elements until you reach the end, and then you discover, oh, well, this was leading to this was building to that. And so reading this a second time, I was able to go back in and start picking out those little Easter eggs and such, and being able to see where this was going way before the conclusion, and also being able to say, oh, I should have caught that, I should have known. So it's a fun thing to do if you decide to read this story more than once. But frightening, not whatsoever. Intense, very much so, especially at the end, and Blackwood is able to build this intensity without there being any blood or guts or gore. It's just the idea of being at the mercy of something cosmic. As far as commentary is concerned, there were 2 subjects that I really picked up on. One is how inferior we are to cosmic forces or the wrath of Mother Nature. And this is something I'm very familiar with, because the thing is, I live in tornado territory. And last year I encountered a tornado that was fairly nearby. And I was at my workplace, was looking out through the window, and saw the tornado across the Mississippi River, which it was just a mile away at that point. And so that was pretty frightening, and I had never felt so inferior of a person as what I did at that moment. So I was really able to relate to the characters in that sense. The other subject that is a fun one to discuss is how this story really stresses that there has to be balance. And this really comes into play when you see the Swedish man has told the narrator that they have to give the spirits a sacrifice so the spirits can direct their attention elsewhere and the men can have the opportunity to escape. And so that's always something that I feel is a fun conversation to have, which is in regards to how there has to be a natural balance. Oh, and I almost forgot. Another thing that I really enjoyed about The Willows is how it feels like it works as suggestive horror. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of parts in the story where Blackwood gives an emphasis to like sand, water, leaves, or the campfire. And because of this being a slow burner, these are some of the Easter eggs that feed into the grand finale, especially since these are subjects that elementals can attach themselves to. So it really feels like it just builds on that whole sense of paranoia a great deal more just by utilizing simple elements. And I really did appreciate that. As I've said in the past, Algernon Blackwood uses a writing technique that is from a bygone literary time. So because of that, his work might not be for everyone. But at the same time, he is the master of creating atmospheric brooding horror, which is exactly what The Willows is. And in a sense, his work always makes me feel like I've experienced Walden meets The Haunting of Hill House. So that's always something that I like to mention to people who have never read him before. And pretty much with this story, even though it's not frightening, it is very intense, it is very creative, and I do like the approach that Blackwood took when utilizing the elemental haunting, especially since he was able to use all elementals of earth, air, fire, and water. So I have to give him major props for that, and it is a story that I do highly recommend. On to the questions. My first question is, what is a book you would recommend that regards a haunted forest? Secondly, do you believe in elemental hauntings? Personally, and I hope I don't offend anyone by saying this, but I don't believe in elemental hauntings. It's just a little too much for me to be able to wrap my brain around, especially with it being like fairies and gnomes and stuff like that. I can't believe in that. I'm sorry. But at the same time, if you do believe in that, or if you've had experiences with that, please don't feel ashamed to share that on this channel. I would love to learn from your experiences and also why you believe they exist. It's totally not something I'm going to bash you for. So please try to use this opportunity to change my mind if you do believe in elementals or elemental hauntings. Now that we have that out of the way, I would like to go on and wrap up the video, and I would like to give a special thanks to the people who have contributed to my Patreon account. So thank you, Lisa G. and Joseph Baylott. And also we have a new contributor this month who is a young adult steampunk fantasy author. Her name is J.L. Mulvihill, and those are the initials of the letter J and L. So if you happen to look her up on Amazon or social media, her work is out there, and it's very suitable for people who are looking for something whimsical, especially for young adults. And if you happen to hit her up on social media, just let her know that Alex sent you. So if you would like to contribute to my Patreon account as well, all you have to do is go to the description section of this video, click on the link for my Patreon, and for $5 a month, I'll give you a shout out. And if you're a creator of some sort, I'll do for you what I just did for J.L. Mulvihill, which is to give you an extra push to the reading audience. Also, if you would like to do the next up tier from that, I do have a $10 option that does give you a shout out, and it also grants you with one creepy photo once a month from my photography stash. So those are some options where you can help support what I do. And if you are unable to contribute, that's no sweat whatsoever. Just continue coming back here and enjoying your time watching these videos. And I do have tons of more videos coming up in the near future. So feel free to subscribe and hit that notifications bell. And if you would like to contact me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, all of those links are in the description section as well. So feel free to hit me up. And until we see each other again, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.